All right, shalom. Wanted to jump on here real quick and just do a little quick little. I'm saying quick. I'm gonna try to make it quick so that we can understand how we get from uh, Feast of Unleavened Bread to Shavuot. Um, we, as I said in the previous video, observe the first crescent as the new moon. And so from the new moon, we know when the first of the year is, the first month of the year, Aviv. We count 14 days. That gives us to Aviv 14 at even. We Passover, even starts, it's the 15th. That's the first day of unleavened bread. Right? And so then now that was Wednesday at this point. And then we're up to, Tuesday, we're up to Shabbat. And so the morrow after Shabbat, we start our count. Now, where do I get this from? Let's look over in the scriptures. Okay, first of all, before we go to the scriptures, we don't have an explicit text in the scriptures that says that the Sabbath that is referring to in Leviticus 23 is the Sabbath that's within or closest to the Feast of Unleavened Bread. We just don't have that specifically spelled out. We can understand, which I'll probably pull out in a separate video, based on the things that the scriptures are hinting at, that there is a deep connection between Feast of Unleavened Bread and Shavuot. So what we say at the Echad is that the Sabbath that is within, or happens simultaneously inside of the Feast of Unleavened Bread, the morrow after that Sabbath is when we begin to count. And so when we look over in Leviticus chapter 23, verse 15, where it says, "And from the morrow after the Sabbath, from the day that you brought your the sheaf of the wave offering, you shall count for yourself 7 complete Sabbaths." So it tells you right there that this morrow after the Sabbath, from the day you brought your sheaf of the wave offering. Well, it talks about that up here in Leviticus 23, starting with verse 9. Now, again, this doesn't say that you're doing this inside of Feast of Unleavened Bread, but it's hinted. Okay? And so even if we look back to, first of all, when we look over here, in a row is telling you have the Passover, Feast of Unleavened Bread, and then here, Feast of First Fruits, which is this wave sheaf offering, which you do the morrow, as it says in verse 11, the morrow after the Sabbath. Now we know that this is not the Sabbath that is called, that is the first day of the Feast of Unleavened Bread. How do we know that? Because if we look at this word over here, the word is Shabbat. So Shabbat is the weekly Sabbath. It's the weekly Sabbath. Now, now at this point, there's going to be a couple of points like this in the scripture in this little short lesson. But at this point, I want to challenge the viewers. If you can show me in the scriptures when in the Hebrew the scriptures is talking about something other than the weekly Sabbath, or the Day of Atonement, or the Sabbath rest of the land, when it uses that word Sabbath, if you could find the scriptures where it uses that word Sabbath and is talking about anything other than those three things I just named, I'd like you to put that in the comments. And then I'll come back and make an apology video after. Okay? So I'm saying that when we see that word Sabbath over here in Leviticus 23:11, this is talking about the weekly Sabbath. Now, the question that you have to answer is, which weekly Sabbath is it? And I'm saying that it makes the most sense that it's the Sabbath that's inside of Feast of Unleavened Bread. And just real quick, think about this. When Yeshua died, our Passover lamb, when he died, our Passover lamb, he died, was buried, rose from the grave, went back to his disciples. And when we go through the scriptures, you can look this up. When it goes through the scriptures to talk about the time in between from whenever he died, when he rose, and when he was with his disciples, and then all the way up to Shavuot. If we understand the fullness of what it is that Yeshua did for us in terms of going away so that the Spirit could come and dwell in us, if we just look at it from a perspective of what the way Yeshua gives it to us, there is a continuity between his death, resurrection, and the giving of the Spirit. We can see a clear continuity there. So if we said we just based it off of the continuity that we see between Yeshua dying and being the Passover lamb and sending out his Spirit, and the connection between his death, burial, and resurrection, and the pouring out of the Spirit, if we can see that connection, then it should be just as easy to see the connection of the things that he's fulfilling in the Old Testament. So if we go back to the scripture over here, when we look at Leviticus 23, this Sabbath here, we're saying is the Sabbath that is connected with the weekly Sabbath that is connected with the Feast of Unleavened Bread, which for our purposes and now 2020, that's this Sabbath right now. That's today. So the morrow after the Sabbath is tomorrow, the first day of the week. So again, if we go down to Leviticus 23 and verse 15, where it says, and from the morrow after the Sabbath, from the day you brought the sheave of the wave offering, you shall count for yourselves 7 complete Sabbaths. Until the morrow after the 7th Sabbath, you shall count 50 days. Then you shall bring a new grain offering. So right there is telling us from the morrow after the Sabbath, which again in 2020 is tomorrow, from the day that you counted the wave sheaf offering, because you did this wave sheaf offering after the weekly Sabbath that's inside of Feast of Unleavened Bread. And then you shall count for yourself 7 complete Sabbaths. 7 complete Sabbaths. And so 7 weeks, essentially, you count, and then tomorrow after the 7th week, full week, Sabbath, this Sabbath, again, this day's Sabbath is used, then you count 50 days, right? And then you have the Feast of Weeks. And so from tomorrow, from the first day of the week, you count 7 days, and then from tomorrow, 7 days up to the Sabbath, and then 7 weeks, right? 7 weeks, 7 Sabbaths plus a day is 50 days. And so again, in 2020, that puts us at May 31st. May 31st is the Feast of Weeks. It's the day of Shavuot. And so, so we count 7 Sabbaths from the first day of the week. Shavuot is always going to be on a Sunday. It's always going to be the morrow after the Sabbath. That's one of the reasons why when we look at the calculated Jewish calendar, why we can just say that that's always not a biblical date, because Shavuot, according to the calculated Jewish calendar, could be on any day of the week, because their morrow after the Sabbath that they start to count is the morrow after the first day of unleavened bread. So if unleavened bread's on a Tuesday, then they start their count on Wednesday. And so they count 7 weeks. And so you can end up having your Shavuot, in the middle of the week. But when you get to this verse over here, when you get to this verse 16, where it says you count until the morrow after the 7th Sabbath, you count 50 days. Well, the only way that you could count the morrow after the Sabbath is, and that be the last day of the count, is if you started on that time, because you're going 7 complete weeks, right? 7 complete weeks, 7 complete Sabbaths, and then the morrow after the Sabbath is always going to be the first day of the week, right? And so May 31st is the day. We'll go ahead and put the date in the comments, and then like I said, if we want to have a discussion or whatever, email contact information is in the comments, and we can deal with these different things. But I just wanted to come on here and just say, where we are, in this day and in these times, so that we can know why we do these things, and also when these things are. So again, May 31st is 7 Sabbaths plus a day from right now. Okay, Shavuot. Okay, so again, if you have any questions, comments, put them in the comments. Please like, share the video, and shalom.